When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Lenora. User, N3EE. Posted, January 14th, 1999.
When people ask about my sister, I lie. I tell them she left town when she was 16. She got a job out west, met some guy, settled down. But the truth is, Lenora was never the settling kind. She didn't leave like most people do. She just stopped being where she was. And if I'm honest, I think she was never fully here to begin with. She was my half-sister, born when I was already old enough to drive. Different mothers, same daddy. I remember the day he brought her home from the hospital, wrapped in a crocheted blanket and staring at nothing with those wide, wet eyes like she'd already seen too much. She didn't cry unless you ignored her. If you were looking straight at her, she was quiet as a lamb. But the moment you turned away, hell broke loose. My mama, Daddy's first wife, called her high-strung. Daddy didn't say much. He barely looked at Lenora even then, not unless she made him. So she grew up odd. That's the word I always come back to. Not mean, not wild, just off. She kept a coffee can full of bird bones under her bed, carried around dead wasps in her pocket, said she liked how they buzzed on the inside. She always wanted to seem older than she was. Wore my lipstick, my perfume, my shoes. She'd wrap herself in a scarf and sashay around the living room like some old screen star, calling herself Miss Lenora Lee. She was barely 9 the first time I caught her trying to flirt with the repairman who came to fix the washing machine. Tilted her chin and put her hand on his knee, and I yanked her away so hard she hit the linoleum. She just smiled at me with blood on her lip and said, "You like me better than you." She always wanted to be looked at. Lenora didn't have friends her age. She'd sit in the back of the church and stare at the deacons like she was daring them to meet her eyes. Some of them did, and she'd wave slow and deliberate, like she was pulling them forward with invisible strings. The pastor's wife started bringing a little bottle of anointing oil in her purse after that. My mama blamed Lenora's. Said she was some kind of backwoods conjure woman from Louisiana, called her that swamp witch, said she'd cursed us by blood. She never liked that Daddy remarried, not just because he did it too quick, but because of who he married. Lenora's mama left her not long after she was born. Walked out when Lenora was 2 and never looked back. Daddy raised her alone. He never talked about that woman, wouldn't even say her name, but Lenora, she wanted to know. Would ask about her constantly, what she looked like, where she went, what she did. She'd sneak into the attic and tear through old boxes of scraps of her letters, receipts, anything with her mother's handwriting. She once found a torn photo of a woman with long black hair and sharp eyes and held it up like a trophy and said, "She sees me." I burned it the next day and still felt cold in the house for a week after. When Mama got sick, things shifted. She'd lie in bed, sweating and mumbling, and Lenora would come over and sit beside her with a little notebook, writing things down. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, keeping track of the words that don't belong to her. When Mama died, Lenora didn't cry. She asked if she could keep her jewelry box, and not for the necklaces, just for the velvet lining. Said it felt like sleeping breath. After that, it was just the three of us. Me, Lenora, and Daddy, who had more ghosts in his eyes than usual. He stopped shaving, started staying out in the shed late into the night, fixing things that didn't need fixing, and Lenora took to sneaking out after dark. I'd find her down by the creek talking to herself, drawing strange little symbols in the dirt with her toes. One morning, I asked her who she talked to out there, and she said, people who remember me from before. I didn't ask what before meant. I didn't want to know. She started bringing home things, feathers, rusty pins, old doll parts, once a jawbone she said she'd found in the neighbor's field. She'd clean them and arrange them in little shrines under her bed, called them memory corners. And the older she got, the stranger it became. By 14, she had a way of making people forget how young she was. Men especially, not boys, men. Grown men with gray in their beards and wives at home. She'd stare too long, laugh too soft, brush imaginary lint off their shirts. She loved the tension, the unease, loved watching people squirm between wanting her and knowing they shouldn't. I told her it was dangerous, told her she was going to get hurt. She just said, I like when they're afraid of liking me. That's when I feel real. I wanted to slap her. I wanted to hold her and cry. I didn't either. The last time I saw her, she was sitting at the foot of Daddy's bed, brushing his hair while he stared at the ceiling. He looked so small, so far away. She looked right at me and said, he used to dream of the rodeo. Now he dreams of nothing. I think that's worse. She left 2 days later. No note, just gone, like her mother. Daddy never looked for her, just sat on the porch and watched the road, day after day. He even died with her name in his mouth, like it was the last thing he could still taste. She sent me one letter, no return address, a piece of paper with a pressed flower inside, and one line in red ink. Don't worry, I remember everything. That was 9 years ago. Now, sometimes, late at night, I'll hear music I don't recognize coming from the woods. Old swing songs, scratchy and distant. Sometimes when I dream, she's there. Not older, not changed, just standing in the corner of the room watching me with that quiet smile, like she knows the end of the story and isn't in any rush to get there. Last month, someone told me she heard about a woman out in Arkansas who married an old radio man named Virgil. Said she had long dark hair and never blinked. I didn't ask any more questions. I already knew.
Subject, the Goose Creek Motel. User, D3 and 01. Posted, April 10th, 1998.
They finally bulldozed the Goose Creek Motel last week. Made the local paper for a day even. Just a photo of a cracked neon sign getting yanked down by a backhoe and a throwaway headline. End of the road for a local landmark. I stared at that photo for a long time. My wife thought I was being nostalgic, said something dumb like, "You sure love that job, huh?" I didn't say anything. She didn't know. Nobody does. I worked nights at the Goose Creek from 79 to early 84. It sat off Paytonsville, just off 65, about 20 miles south of Nashville, though honestly, you could drop that whole stretch of interstate anywhere and it wouldn't make a difference. Same gas station, same squatty diner with burnt coffee and pie crust like wet cardboard. And that motel was there since the 50s, built back when people still had hope about the open road. But by the time I got there, it had peeled off all that promise and left nothing but mildew and ghosts. I worked the night desk, midnight to 8. Place had 24 rooms, and I knew the smell of every one of them. You got your truckers looking for shut-eye. You got women in sunglasses with kids and no luggage. You got construction guys who paid in cash who stayed long enough to stink the place up and then vanish before their boss could fire them. You also got folks with no name, no ID, and a wad of bills that smelled like gasoline. And then there were the regulars. The guy in room 103 was named Duke. Swore he was a private investigator, though I think he was just hiding out. He had a mustache that looked like it belonged to someone more respectable. Room 111 was a woman named Carla who sold pills out of her purse and sometimes shared a six-pack with me if the night was dead. She called me Hun, smoked menthols like they were oxygen. And then there was a kid we just called Spider for the tattoos. He stayed in room 9. Said he worked at a scrapyard, but I think he just dealt coke to the people who did. Thing is, you work a place like that long enough, you learn the shape of crazy. You know when someone's too loud, too friendly, too clean, or too quiet. That's the trick. The quiet ones. They don't ever give you reason to look twice until it's too damn late. And that's what brings me to room 216. He checked in one rainy Tuesday in late 83. Name on the book was Mr. Grayson, and he looked like somebody's accountant. Breast slacks, thin frame, hair neat and silver. Said he was heading to Atlanta but needed a few days to recalibrate. Paid cash 2 nights up front, no questions. I didn't blink. We weren't in the question business. But I remember how normal he seemed. That's what sticks with me. Everyone else at Goose Creek wore their lives on their sleeves. Pain, addiction, desperation, rage. It hung off them like wet jackets, but not this guy. He moved like a man who had all his shit squared away. A whisper in a place built on yelling. At the time, the state was in a panic. Somebody had been killing women all across the midsection of Tennessee, maybe even farther. The papers called him the surgeon, and yeah, it was as bad as it sounds. He cut them open, took things, organs, left the rest in motel rooms, truck beds, drainage ditches. Almost all the bodies were found within spitting distance of the highway. You'd think something like that would make people stay home, lock their doors, but our clientele, they didn't care. Half of them were running from worse. You tell a guy who's on his 4th warrant that there's a killer out there, he'll laugh and ask for a smoke. Anyway, a few weeks after Mr. Grayson checked in, the manager, Pete, comes down from the main house looking pissed. "Slim," he said. Yeah, that's what he called me back then. "Slim, that fella in 216, he's over a week behind. I haven't seen a dime. I think he skipped." I shrugged. "Haven't seen him, but his car's still there." Pete dropped a ring of keys on the counter. "Go check it out, would you? If he's gone, toss his shit." So I did what I was told. I knocked once, twice, No answer. I called out. Nothing. Told myself I'd just peek in first. Tell Pete it was empty, then go back to my coffee and the AM radio. I'd deal with the mess later. Well, I wish to God I had not opened that door. The smell hit first. Sweet and rotten, like syrup poured over a dead squirrel. The kind of smell that clings to your teeth. The room was dark. Curtains drawn tight. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. Bulb was blown or the power had been cut. So I stepped in. That's when I saw the jars. Lined up on the dresser, the desk, even on the floor near the bed, mason jars, pickling jars, baby food jars, all filled with fluid and things. Lumps of meat glistening in the low light, suspended in amber liquid. There were hearts, livers, kidneys. There was a goddamn uterus. I staggered back, stumbled. I remember knocking over a jar and watching it roll, not break, just roll. Slow, over and over, like the world was giving me a chance to run, and I took that chance. I didn't call the cops. I didn't tell Pete. I didn't even shut the door. I got in my Chevy and drove. Kept driving until the sun came up and I crossed state lines. Never went back. Didn't even pick up my last paycheck. I changed my name a few months later and moved down to Florida. Told everyone I was a vet with a bad back. It was easier than explaining what I wasn't. I kept expecting to see something in the news. Surgeon found in Goose Creek Motel, but nothing ever came. No mention of room 216, but here's the thing. There weren't any more killings either, at least as far as I could tell. It just stopped. Sometimes I wonder if he knew, that I saw, that I left. Sometimes I dream I'm standing at the door again and the room is full of him. Not just the jars, him. The truth, though, is that I was really scared. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't want to die. Not in that place, not alone in the dark with my guts in a jar. And if I'd called the cops and he came back for me, well, you understand, right? They knocked the Goose Creek down last week, and maybe that's for the best, but I know somewhere out there, that man is still walking. I'm sure of it. He's still waiting, and I'm still running.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.